Okay, perfect. All right, we're going to keep going on here then. Brilliant. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the first What's Your Story, which we are running with the one of my favourite people, the most amazing Helen Tupper, who is a huge inspiration to me, as well as just being really bloody lovely. But I'm going to talk more about her in a moment. I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing What's Your Story. And actually, it was an idea that kind of originated from conversations with Helen and the lovely Sarah as well over at Amazing If. You know, we talk a lot about how at the moment 2020 has kind of blown our minds, and I mean that quite literally. A very good friend of ours and mental health campaigner, Jeff McDonald, eloquently puts it that COVID has democratized mental health. And I suppose what I mean by that is that, you know, we've really realized the impact of external events on how we're thinking and how we're feeling. And of course, that's not great, but great that actually we're all talking about this stuff and talking about actually how we can manage ourselves better, you know. And I genuinely think, therefore, that there's never been a better time to talk about this and better time to actually get a message out there about how we could be looking after ourselves better. And it's such an important thing. So for this World Mental Health Day, obviously, we really wanted to do something a little bit different. And this is what What's Your Story is all about, you know, actually helping people understand themselves a little bit better. And actually, you know, positive mental health, I think, you know, for many of us should be the baseline of what we're hoping for ourselves and for others as well. But how do we do that? So we decided to pull together 20 of the most brilliant people that we know, of course, which Helen is one of them, to talk a little bit about our lives and the things that we faced and how we manage our minds on a day-to-day basis in order to be the brilliant people that we each are. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Helen. Helen is the co-founder and CEO of Amazing If, an award-winning career development company with a mission to make work better for everyone. And I definitely want to talk about that later on. She's co-author of the Sunday Times #1 business bestseller, The Squiggly Career, which, may I say, is brilliant, and host of the UK's #1 careers podcast, Squiggly Careers. She also works as a trustee for Working Families, a UK charity with a mission to support families and carers with their work and life commitments. And prior to Amazing If, she held a number of leadership positions across different blue chip companies. Helen, thank you so much for coming along. And as I said,
thank you for making this event happen.
An idea between us, didn't it? All of that time ago.
I know, and you ran with it. That's what Kate's brilliant at, is like running with an idea.
It's like, oh my gosh, she's got off with it already. There it is. Listen, Helen, I would love to kick things off. I want everyone to know, to understand a little bit about your experience, you know, and obviously kind of what's got you here. And I suppose really, what was the point? Well, I'd love to hear more about your story, and let's tie that into mental health. What was the point when you realized that you have mental health?
I think so if I think about my career and some of the times that have been tough, I think it's in the times that have been tough that I can really spot when my mental health has been good or not so good. So if I think about, I don't know, the really challenging manager, the manager who lingers, you know, you take them home with you. And, those managers. And I think about, you know, I've got 2 children, and there was a time when I had my first child, which actually I think you're particularly vulnerable with your first child, because like you don't know what you're doing on so many fronts. And I came back to work after my first child, where I was working at Virgin, and I was launching a new business at Virgin. I was doing my MBA at the same time, which was sort of not planned. And then I had this little baby, and that was a tough time. But to your point about when did you notice I had mental health, what I realized was, for me, even when times get tough, I seem to recover quite quickly. And I would be talking to other people who would be having some of the same challenges that I was. You know, we've all had those managers that linger. And lots of people have lots of things that they're, you know, spinning and juggling and stuff at the same time. But I realized that my emotions seemed to be more neutral a lot of the time. Like I didn't seem to get so affected by the stresses and strains. And when it did happen, I was able to bounce back quite quickly. Like within the same week, I could turn it, like my optimism sort of turned on, and I would be able to think, okay, this is a passing thing. This is something that's happening at the moment, but I've dealt with it before. I can do it again. And I think that recovery, that the speed of recovery for me made me think, oh, that seems to be a strength that I've got. I can have these challenging situations, and they definitely affect me in the moment, and I might not feel brilliant about them, and you know, not everything's rosy all the time, but I think I have an ability to recover quite quickly. And we, amazing if we call resilience, we don't really like the term, you know, people talk about resilience as bouncing back. Not a big fan of that, because I think, why do we want to go back to where we were? Like, we call it moving forward with momentum. And I think that's what I've been able to do. Tough situations happen to all of us. I think my mental health shows up in my ability to move through it and forward with momentum, and I'm very grateful for it.
So interesting. I'm just like, God, that is so much to dig into there. You know, we're talking about resilience, and listen, the reason that we're doing this now is that because I think at the moment, actually, the stories that we can take from others and understand what other people have been going through suddenly becomes so valuable at the moment. So we can all start learning from them, you know, and resilience for us at the moment is that crucial word, right? And resilience is absolutely not a plan. It is a muscle that we need to keep flexing. And I really like that point that you say about not bouncing back, because at the moment, you know, everyone's like, well, when's it going to go back to normal? Do you know what? Not back to normal, or how things were, that wasn't great anyway. You know, if we look back on that, sorry, let me rephrase that, you know, that came with its own challenges. You know, I talk a lot about how we went from a really high stress situation of never feeling like we were doing enough to a place of high anxiety where we're sitting in our thoughts so much more. And actually, you know, that we don't necessarily want to go back there. We want to look at actually how we want life to be now and kind of get into control of it. But I love that point that you were saying about resilience. And actually, for me, I think a really good interpretation for resilience is about flexibility. So I can flex to the situations that are coming up. But I'd really like to go into that, because I think that what you talked about there, you know, sometimes you see people who innately seem to be able to be more resilient to situations, whereas others are more flawed by them. And I wonder what that is. Do you think that is down to something that is more innate, or do you think that you're, you know, for me, for example, we talk a lot about different energy sources and how you can manage those. Do you think that that's always been something you've been very good at? And I mean as much emotional energy as much as maybe as a physical energy. So managing your mind so these things don't become overwhelming.
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a bit of conscious thought, and a bit of kind of my kind of natural way of being. So like if I think back to being younger, I could compartmentalize things quite a lot. So you know, my father died when I was 11 years old. It's quite a significant experience, and I'm not saying I compartmentalize that, but I think I have an ability to have like the time that I'm in work and put a boundary around that, and then you know, be the mum version of me and be the friend. And I think there's something within me that finds that easier to do, to have those boundaries around my work. But then there's also some stuff that I've really practiced. So the work of Martin Seligman, so positive psychologist, has really resonated with me, and he talks about like what we call the 3 Ps of pessimism. So like when tough stuff happens, and he says that, you know, when we're pessimistic, that can really trap us in this like tough stuff bubble, let's call it that. And the first P is that we make it very personal. So this is my fault, I have caused this is about me and how I show up. So you personalize everything. Then you make it really pervasive. So, oh my gosh, my entire life is affected by this situation. Everything's going wrong at the same time. It's like catastrophizing it. And then you make it really permanent, and you go, and it's never going to ever get better. So you kind of personalize it, make it pervasive, and make it permanent. And when you do that,
is overwhelming.
You're stuck in the situation. And I think what I have, because I've had that in my head, is like I've been able to see it whenever I've fallen into those like traps, like that kind of pessimism trap. I've kind of gone, oh, I'm making it about all about me, and actually there's a whole other factor at play here. So like the bad manager example, for quite a long time I made that about me. It's because I'm not showing up well, it's because I'm not doing a good job. And you know what, that person had their own stuff going on, and if I'd actually in the moment sort of said, well, what if this wasn't about me? What if this was about what that person's going through and the situation they're experiencing? Maybe then I don't take so much of this stress and anxiety on myself. And I find them quite helpful.
Do you know, I mean, again, you've just said so many brilliant things there, you know, and really interestingly, I was coaching someone recently, and we were talking about, you know, a terrible manager that they'd had. Really, you know, in hearing it, I could immediately, I was like, you've been quite severely bullied here, you know, and actually, you know, going back through those and consequently it had a huge impact on her, right, in terms of actually her self-belief and how she felt about herself. And bear in mind that this had happened quite early on in her career. You know, she had taken that through a lot of her career afterwards. And one of the exercises that we actually did together was to go back over those scenarios and say, okay, well, let's go back through them rather than necessarily the perspective that you've seen it in. How else could we view this, right? And what was she bringing into this? Or maybe what was going on with her? And suddenly we start seeing things in a different way. And that then actually takes a lot of that pain and sting out of it. So we can view things in a much more neutral way.
And I think you can still go back and do that, you know, do that exercise. So people, I think if people have got a hangover of a bad experience, you know, we've mentioned managers there, it could be a life experience, a different work experience, a failure that they might hold on to. I think you can still, if that is stopping you moving forward because it keeps coming up and affecting your patterns of thought, I think you can still go and unpick it. Like, better to reflect and, you know, go through the 3 Ps and say, oh, hang on a minute, how much of this do I see in that moment, and how much is it affecting other moments that I'm in, and what could I do differently? I think sometimes you know, looking back to go forward is quite a healthy thing, particularly if it's a bit of a shadow.
I couldn't agree more, you know, and I think actually, you know, that is an incredibly valuable tool and something probably you're going to want to do with a professional, right? You know, and certainly I know it's something that I've looked at quite a lot, you know, you know, the long held beliefs that we have. Listen, that's really hard to rewire, but it's actually pretty easy to start building new things on top of that and actually being able to view things in a different way. And the benefit, of course, that can bring in terms of how we can view things, which I think is really interesting. I love that stuff around the 3 Ps of permission. You know, and for me, a lot of that actually comes down to, you know, I don't know if you've read the book by Byron Katie, where loving what is. And actually, you know, the questions that we can ask ourselves when we are in these situations, not all that it's a really nice execution of what you were talking about, but the very simple question of whichever thought I'm having, is it true?
Yeah.
Is it true? And it's like, wow, that suddenly opens up, you know, is it true? What evidence do I have for this? How does this thought serve me? And what impact is it having on me? What could I think instead? And actually, you know, that suddenly starts rebalancing and giving you a really good structure that's similar with the 3 Ps there, of thinking in a different way. And that's what we need to do in those moments, right? Get out of this kind of myopic thinking to think in a different way.
And I think that's the thing that you can do on your own. So, you know, like, think about if you're in a situation and it's feeling really hard and you think, oh, this is affecting how I'm feeling about myself, my work. I think you can just take 5 minutes and, you know, piece of paper, 2 columns, facts on one side, feelings on the other, and just do a bit of a dump and go, well, how much of this is in my head and how much of this, like, have I actually had some bad feedback? Is it like, what are the actual facts of the situation? And then, you know, and it will tell your own story when you look at that, but it just gives you, I just think these tools that help people to reflect and look after themselves and take a moment, like just like pause in the situation, are very helpful in helping you to move forward. And we don't talk about those enough. We don't make them accessible enough to people. We just leave a lot of people to sort all this stuff that's going on in their heads out on their own.
Yeah, and you know, we talk a lot about this, the actual, you know, and you kind of highlighted it there, the actual getting it out of our heads and onto paper, I personally think is one of the most powerful things that we can be doing. You know, journaling for me has been one of the greatest gifts in the world. You know, just like actually, and of course you writing your book, I mean, that in itself, like actually being able to get all of this stuff out, you know, the power of it not being up here and suddenly I can see it, it's something I can deal with.
I know, and I know, because I feel I'm always a bit conscious with, like, you know, mental health, and I'm sure you'll hear from lots of people that do, you know, exercise and meditation. They have all these tools, and I think for somebody that might not be doing those things at the moment, it can sound a bit far from their reality. But journaling for me has been really helpful, and I don't do it every single day, but I do have quite a rhythm of doing it. And I mean, it's a whole load of nonsense that I write most of the time. I have like I just write 1 page, and sometimes it's just like reflections on yesterday, and sometimes it's like I just get to some clarity by the end of it, but I don't really put any expectations on it, and I rarely read it back. But I think it's just getting noise out of my head, and whether something useful comes out of that I can put into action, or whether I've just got some noise out of my head, that's good enough for me to have a bit of more clarity in that day and in that moment.
Do you find with the journaling, when you're saying that you have a bit of a rhythm for it, is that like a morning thing? Or?
Yeah, it's morning. So I tend to get up quite an early riser, just naturally. And also I try to get up before my kids, because as soon as then it's like, mummy, make me porridge, and it's just like noise, lovely noise, but it's a lot of noise. So I try to get up before the kids. I sit on my own, have a glass of water, and I just write. And then I always try to conclude like with some kind of, and this is going to, again, for the people that don't do this, probably going to sound really cheesy, but I try and conclude with some kind of, what might be called an affirmation, but it's something that I've got to through my thoughts. So maybe it is like, I don't know, move forward my way. Maybe I've written this whole thing about, yesterday I felt a bit like I was comparing myself to other people. I didn't feel that was helpful. And then I'll kind of conclude with, okay, what's a single statement that I can hold on to today that might help me do something different from yesterday? And I don't plan those. It's just something that I've written that page and I'm like, oh, this is a statement that might help me today.
I love that. It's interesting. There's a couple of bits there. I don't know if you've read The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma.
No, I haven't.
Right. 5 a.m., I need to be honest, is a little bit too early for me. But for 6 a.m., very, very happy with. And actually, so he talks a lot about, and the reason he says 5 a.m., to be fair, I think it was pre-commute. And, he talks a lot about 5 a.m. and the rationale behind it being is that we need to be before we do, right? And so which makes a lot of sense and ties into what you were talking about. So the three things that he says to do is to exercise, first of all, develop some self-awareness, and then some form of self-development. So exercise followed by journaling or meditation, and then 20 minutes of self-development as well. And for me, that has been so powerful, like getting up that bit, whatever happens, I'm up at 6 a.m, I'm walking the dog for an hour, listening to some kind of podcast, and then doing some kind of journaling. And that whole thing, or, in particular, and you'll get this, of course, shifting from corporate work into running your own business. I think about my business 99.9% of the time. I liken it to having a really needy girlfriend, which of course I'd have no understanding what that's like at all. But the point about it being is that it's always there. So I have to find those moments for me. And, that for me has really been quite a radical impact. Being before doing, for me is a real help. And actually, you touched on something else really nice earlier on about the boundarying. And I think actually, in a world which feels quite boundary-less at the moment, we need to get better at putting this stuff in these moments for us, because otherwise everything just spreads.
Yeah, and I think, I guess, two reflections. What I always do worry, I did read this book called The Miracle Morning by, I think it's called Helen Tupper. Yeah, and I read it, and I think I tried it for a week, and I was like, this is stressful. How do I fit all of this? So I think what I really love that you said is like that sentiment of being before doing. And if people can fit all that in, amazing. But the worst thing for people to do would be to beat themselves up because they can't do it before the kids are up. And so I think being before doing, like whatever that looks like for you, I think is a really, really, really powerful statement. It's kind of something that's helped me, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that, immediately for me personally, 5 a.m. was a stress, right? All of a sudden, if I'm not in bed by 8 p.m, I was like, oh my God, get up. Which, I kind of want to stay up till 9 sometimes. Sometimes I just want to watch something on the BBC. Go absolutely nuts. But 5 a.m. was a bit of a stretch, but I turned it into my version of it, and that in itself, there's something about you kind of feel like you're kind of getting slightly one up on the world. That actually you have started your day and you've started it in the right place. Helen, I really want to talk, a little bit about the kind of managing, and I'm really interested in this. It's something that I'm looking at a lot at the moment. How do we manage the impact of others upon our mental health? Now, I know that we've talked about it a little bit with bosses, but, and I suppose I'd like to think about it both from your point of view and also a bit about squiggly careers and how that supports us with the impact of others. What kind of tools do you, is there anyone in particular, any type of person in particular that has an impact on you? How do you manage it?
Yeah. So there's a saying, it's not research, I wish it was research proven, but it just sticks with me, that you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. It always makes me think, okay, well, even if that's partly true, who are those people and what is their impact on me and what is my impact on them? I think it's just a useful thing to reflect on. And you can, whether you call it radiators and drains or however you phrase it, I think just thinking about, well, who am I spending time with? What's the impact on them? And I think what I have noticed is, for me, I benefit from people who believe you can do things. So curious people who have a positivity about what's possible and are excited and interested. Like that, for me, those people are so good for me because they give me resilience and confidence and optimism, and they're they're batteries for me. They're amazing. And I feel like I get depleted by people that are quite negative and are trapped, and I think you have to have some empathy for those people, because there could be, it doesn't mean that I never spend time with them. It just means that I have to think differently about how I spend time with those people. Like, can I help them or not? How do I make sure? I'm quite interested in this concept of transference. So I coach a lot of people, and some of those people will be in that state of mind at that sort of state of time in their lives. And I have to just make sure that transference is, you'll know, but for people watching, it's where, think about it as like leaking emotions. And I have to make sure that, because I know that I may be vulnerable to those emotions and I might come away from it and I might feel a bit flat and a bit affected by it. I have to just be aware of that and sort of protect my emotions and not try to take on too much of those. And a thing about me which doesn't always help is I try and solve problems. I want everything to be better. And some problems are not to be solved, and they're not to be solved by me, and they're not to be solved then and there. And I think just knowing that my role in those conversations is to listen, to ask questions, but it's not to absorb, and it's not to take on, and it's not to solve a problem. And I think just understanding that I can spend time with people who are in that space, and I can still be a help to them, but I don't have to take it on myself, has been a big learning for me.
And do you know what? And I don't know about you, but for me, that is the really interesting space between, again, running a business or having had, senior positions to being a coach. I'm still kind of like in that mode of, I just want to sort it, like rather than the kind of like, I want to help your thinking in this space. So that's really interesting. But I wanted to ask you a question, actually, that you said there that the three qualities that you love, the curiosity, the excited, and the interested. And then I would like to talk more about the transference, etc. Are they similar values to your own, or do you look for someone with different values?
Well, so my values, which I've done work on, so I can talk about these quite quickly and confidently, but I would highly recommend people to look into it. My values are freedom, growth, energy, and achievement. So I guess they're sort of mirror emotions that I find sort of fuel me. But no, I mean, if I look at my business partner, Sarah, she's really different to me. Really different. She's an introvert. I'm an extrovert. She's way more reflective than me. I'm really action focused. Like, I want to move stuff quickly. We were talking this week and I was like, oh, it's taking too long. And she laughed at me and she was like, it's because you don't like things like taking too long, Helen. And maybe think I need to sit with it. So, no, I love being with people. I think you learn just as much as you do about them as you do about yourself when you spend time with different people. But ultimately, I think it's those people that have got a desire to do things and move things forward in however they approach that. And I find people's brains interesting. So anybody that's willing to have like a interesting conversation about something they've read, that sort of fires my neurons up and stimulates my brain. I'm known with a very good friend of mine, Kirsty, who, funny enough, I did a conversations with Kate with over lockdown, who's also a coach. She's like, Kate, you just hate small talk, don't you? I'm like, yeah, I hate it. Like, I love this stuff. I like, even this morning when I was talking to the girls and they came over and I was like, right, let's just run through some of the questions and stuff. They're like, Jesus, this got deep quick. And I was like, yeah, good morning.
It's like a dream all day. I'm talking about deep stuff. It's like my favorite thing. And I think I'm really interested in this space about transference, or whether or not we talk about it as absorbing. At the moment, you know, if we are talking about, we are more and less affected, right, by stuff that's going on. For me, and I don't know if you agree with it. You know, this year has just been, it's been big, right? It's been intense. It's been a lot. It's been fucking real, and you know, we've felt more stuff than we've necessarily felt or allowed ourselves to feel or admitted or any of those things in previous times. And because of that, there is greater likelihood we're going to be taking stuff on from other people. Talk to me a little bit about, and this is, and I suppose I want to be careful. I don't want to make this too hard. So, any tips from you about managing that? Certainly one from me would be something around, you know, and again, this kind of goes back to coaching. And we do this now at Push when we start our morning meetings. We say a feeling that we're bringing into the session, right? So, and labeling that, which we think really helps with kind of like immediately understanding your own thought, being able to deal with it, and then other people knowing. Anything from you in particular, I suppose, for people in teams of managing different dynamics of people?
Yeah. So I think the main thing for me, if you're in a team environment, you said one of them about feelings. I think having conversations about feelings and experiences. So not about like the to your point, the human being behind the human doing. A lot of work chat is, when does it need to be in? Who needs to be on it? Like, you know, it's sort of operational work conversation, and that's fair. That's how we get work done. But I think we have to look behind it to the people doing it. And I think if you are just having conversations where the word feelings are in it and the word experience, so it might sound like, how are you feeling about this project at the moment? How are you feeling as a result of the latest announcement that the office is going to be closed until March next year? So just put the word feeling into a question. And then I also think experience is also a good word to put in it. So what's your experience been over the last 6 months? When have you experienced feeling like this before? I mean, that's a double whammy, isn't it? But I think if we can, because I know that these conversations can feel quite intimate for people, maybe a bit awkward. And I think if you can just think, well, if I just put the word feeling in a question and I put the word experience, then we get somebody's, you know, we're learning from people's lived experience. We're understanding the person behind the problem that they might be working on. And I think that can make it just easier, and just do that more frequently, do that more regularly, and be a good listener. Like if you're going to ask those questions, you have to follow it up by being a good listener. And that means you're not looking at somebody else on a Zoom meeting. That means that you've created an environment which is comfortable for that conversation to happen, that you're not distracted and looking at your phone at the same time. Like, be, I think, respectful of what that person is sharing with you. And I think that goes a long way to create a safe space.
You know what? I mean, that's just so blooming true, isn't it? You know, I think that we have spent hundreds, if not thousands of years of asking people how they are, and neither A, sharing genuinely how we are, or B, actually caring about it. I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they were saying about a friend of theirs that they spoke to, who asked one of their colleagues how they were, and their colleague went into this long like diatribe of what was actually going on with them, and this guy just went, all I really wanted to know is if they were fine. And, you know, but the point is, you know, and interestingly, we I did the event that we ran last week. One of the things that we were talking about was, you know, how do we create cultures which get people to peak performance, right?
Yeah.
And actually, you know, cultures where people feel like they belong. And by the way, almost half of all people don't feel like they belong at work. Cultures where people feel like they belong are going to get the best out of people. And at the heart of that is helping someone understand that they matter. That they matter to you.
Yeah.
You know, if I matter, then I know that I can make a difference. You know, if you matter to me, I'm considering what it is that you have to say. And if we matter, then we can go out together in the world and actually do something.
Yeah.
It makes a radical difference in your day to day. You know, it's my reason to keep going. But it's such a crucial and such an easy thing, and we're bloody missing the point on it. You know,
I sometimes I say about like the importance of putting the care back into career, because it's become, you know, competitive and comparison and all those. I think they just create a lot of negativity. And actually, if we could care more for ourselves And we went so hard on ourselves. Maybe we cared more for the people around us and what they're going through. I think I just think careers could be better for everybody if we put a bit of care back into it, and we were able to, the feelings, the experiences, the listening, the empathy, the kindness, like put that back into it. And you can still be successful and amazing and brilliant, even more so, just with a bit more care.
And it's that missing thing, isn't it, for so many, that art of kindness. I mean, it's just bloody everything. But you just nailed it there. You know, care for self, that comes before everything. You know, and I do think that there is something in, you know, as I touched on, as challenging as this year has been, it has to be that moment, that flashpoint of, right, what do I want life to look like now? What do I want life to look like now, with me at the heart of it, right? With me as the person who's most important. I've got to understand myself a bit better and really understand what I want life to look like. And I've got to look after myself. And we've got to take this moment. We really have.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's become really clear running my own business. My business doesn't function without me. But absolutely. I think I almost regret that I didn't have that attitude in corporate life, because I think we sort of all are our own business. We all earn money that supports our life. We all have that. We all have our own brand. And I think if we thought, well, I have to look after myself first, or I can't be brilliant in this job, or I can't, you know, progress in the way that I wanted to, or run that side project, or whatever it is. I think if you look after it sounds horrible to say look after yourself first, but I think we have to get over that feeling like an egotistical thing to do. By looking after yourself, you're looking after the people that you have around you as well.
To put it simply, I know if I don't put my self-care first, then everything else goes to shit. It really does, you know, and I actually have to factor that time into my day. You know, it's like, for example, the being before doing, it's such a crucial thing for me. If I don't do it, then I'm not going to be able to look after everything else as well. Helen, I've loved this. Like, we have sped through the time as I knew that we would. I'd like to just kind of sum up some of the points that came out of it, because this was so rich with different concepts and ideas that, you know, I know that people are going to get so much from. You know, first and foremost, talking about resilience and how actually that's about a momentum of moving forward rather than kind of going back to what was. Talked a lot about boundaries, the 3 P's of permission, which I thought were brilliant. You know, it's not personal, it's not pervasive, i.e. it being overcoming, you know, and it's not permanent. We talked about journaling, the power of that, and about how that can get stuff out of our heads. Being before doing, such an important thing. So committing that time for ourselves. And, you know, this whole thing of who are those 5 people within our lives that, you know, we're having an impact on, and they are having an impact on us, and what do we want that to be? And then different things about how we can kind of like work better with people, in particular if there's a lot more emotions coming up. How do we manage that? Something around, you know, the labeling of emotions, but also checking in with people, asking how they're feeling, you know, and what they're experiencing, and then, you know, making them feel like they matter. I think that was just so useful. We've covered so much ground. Can we start every day like this?
Yes, let's. Let's get up at 5. No, let's not.
Oh God, can you imagine? Listen, have the best day. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get through the next 19 interviews. I probably won't be quite as sparky as this, but I'm just going to be like, what do you think?
It is going to be brilliant. I'm absolutely sure of it.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.